June 6, 1944. Dawn breaks over the English Channel and German coastal defenders peer through the morning mist at what they think they know. 5,000 Allied ships, infantry landing craft. The invasion they've been preparing for. But what rolls onto those Norman beaches in the next few hours will shatter everything Wehrmacht commanders thought they understood about modern warfare. Because approaching through the surf are tanks that swim like boats, tanks that spit liquid fire 120 meters, tanks with spinning metal drums and chains that pound the earth like mechanical demons, detonating mines with each thunderous rotation. The Germans have never seen anything like this, and that's exactly the point. These aren't standard tanks. They're something the British troops call Hobart's Funnies, named after the eccentric, brilliant and thoroughly difficult Major General Percy Hobart. And on D-Day, these bizarre machines will prove the difference between catastrophic failure and hard-won success on 3 of the 5 landing beaches. But to understand why these strange vehicles exist at all, we need to rewind 2 years to one of the war's most disastrous operations. August 19th, 1942. The French port of Dieppe. British and Canadian forces launch what's supposed to be a large-scale raid testing amphibious assault tactics and gathering intelligence. It turns into a bloodbath. Of the nearly 5,000 Canadian troops who hit those beaches, more than 900 are killed and nearly 2,000 captured. The tanks that managed to get ashore bogged down in the soft shingle beach, their tracks spinning uselessly. German gunners in concrete bunkers methodically destroy them. Infantry attempting to advance across open beaches are cut down by machine gun fire. The operation is over by early afternoon, leaving behind a beach littered with burning tanks and casualties. But from this disaster comes brutal clarity. Any future invasion of occupied Europe will require specialized armored vehicles. Standard tanks simply won't cut it against the German Atlantic Wall's elaborate defenses. The beaches are mined. Tank traps and concrete obstacles block the approaches. Bunkers and gun emplacements cover every meter of sand. Soft ground will trap conventional armor. And that's before you even consider getting the tanks from ship to shore in the first place. The British Army needs solutions, and they need someone unconventional enough to develop them. Someone who doesn't think inside the military's usual rigid boxes. Someone, frankly, that most of the establishment considers a difficult troublemaker. They need Percy Hobart. Hobart is 57 years old in 1943 when he's given command of the 79th Armoured Division with an extraordinary mission. Develop and train crews for specialized assault vehicles that can breach Hitler's coastal defenses. It's a remarkable comeback for a man who was forcibly retired just 3 years earlier. Hobart had spent the 1920s and 1930s pioneering armoured warfare tactics, but his abrasive personality and radical ideas about tank doctrine made him enemies throughout the British military hierarchy. In 1940, General Archibald Wavell forced him into retirement. Hobart ended up as a lance corporal in the Home Guard, defending his village of Chipping-Campden. But Prime Minister Winston Churchill had been watching Hobart's career. When he learned that one of Britain's greatest tank mines was reduced to local defence duties, Churchill personally intervened. Over the objections of the War Office establishment, Hobart was brought back to active service. Now, in March 1943, with the Normandy invasion looming, the Chief of the Imperial General Staff, General Alan Brooke, gives Hobart perhaps the most important assignment of the war. The 79th Armoured Division is redesignated as experimental, its mission, prepare for D-Day. Hobart immediately transforms his division into a freewheeling think tank. His first directive to his troops includes this remarkable statement: the success of the operation depends on the element of surprise caused by new equipment. Suggestions from all ranks for improvements in equipment are to be encouraged. It's an almost unheard-of approach in the British Army's rigid hierarchy. But Hobart knows that good ideas can come from anywhere. His engineers, tank crews and junior officers begin working on problems that would stump conventional military planners. The division's insignia becomes a black bull's head with flaring nostrils superimposed over a yellow triangle. It's carried proudly on every vehicle, and it becomes a symbol that terrifies German defenders. But first, Hobart and his team need to solve fundamental problems. How do you get 30-ton tanks from landing craft to shore, when rough seas can swamp any conventional vehicle? How do you clear paths through minefields under fire? How do you neutralize concrete bunkers that can withstand direct hits from tank guns? How do you cross soft sand that will trap heavy vehicles? How do you bridge anti-tank ditches? How do you destroy obstacles that block the way inland? For each problem, Hobart and his engineers develop specialized solutions. And the most extraordinary of these, the one that will be used on all 5 D-Day beaches, is the DD tank. DD stands for duplex drive, but everyone calls them Donald Ducks, and when you see one, you understand why. The concept comes from Nicholas Straussler, a Hungarian engineer who had fled to Britain in the late 1930s. Straussler's idea is brilliantly simple in theory, wildly ambitious in practice. Take a standard Sherman tank, 32 tons of steel, surround it with a waterproof canvas screen held up by inflatable rubber tubes and metal struts. Add 2 propellers at the rear driven by the tank's engine, and suddenly you have a floating tank that can swim from landing craft to shore, then drop its canvas skirt and fight as a normal armoured vehicle. The engineering is extraordinary. A mild steel platform shaped like a boat hull is welded to the tank's chassis. The canvas flotation screen, made of heavy rubberized material, is attached to this platform. When compressed air inflates 36 vertical rubber tubes, the screen rises to create a floating envelope around the entire tank. With the screen raised, only about 3 feet of canvas shows above the waterline, making the tank look like an innocent boat from a distance. But underneath is a fully armed Sherman with a 75mm gun and machine guns. The tank commander stands on the outside with a long tiller, steering by adjusting the ball and socket propellers. The driver sits inside, essentially blind, operating the tank by instruments alone. In rough seas, water constantly sloshes over the low freeboard. A bilge pump works continuously to keep the tank from swamping. The crew, except for the driver, sits on top of the tank ready to jump clear if it sinks. Because that's the terrifying reality. If the canvas screen is badly damaged at sea, the tank plummets to the bottom. The crew has seconds to escape. It's a nerve-wracking way to go to war. But on D-Day, DD tanks will be the first armoured vehicles ashore. They'll provide crucial fire support for the infantry hitting the beaches in theory. The reality will be more complicated, and on Omaha Beach it will be catastrophic. We'll get to that. While Straussler's DD tanks solve the problem of getting armour ashore, Hobart's team is simultaneously developing solutions for the obstacles that await once tanks reach the beach. And this is where the really exotic vehicles come in, the ones that earn the division its nickname, Hobart's Funnies. Consider the Sherman Crab. Take a reliable Sherman tank and add a rotating metal drum mounted on arms in front of the vehicle. Attach 43 heavy chains to this drum. Connect the drum to the tank's main engine so it spins at high speed. When those chains strike the ground, they detonate any mines buried up to 5 inches deep. The noise is absolutely deafening, a constant hammering that can be felt in the earth from hundreds of meters away. Clouds of dust and dirt billow behind the flailing chains. When a mine explodes, 1 or 2 chains are destroyed, flying through the air before crashing back to earth. But the tank keeps moving, keep flailing, clearing a safe path through the minefield. The Crab can only move at about 1¼ miles per hour while flailing. The gun has to point rearward. The crew is essentially deaf from the noise, and visibility is reduced to almost nothing by the dust clouds. But the Crab is extraordinarily effective. German minefields had been laid methodically, with thousands of mines covering approaches to defensive positions. Clearing them by hand would take hours and cost lives. The Crab can punch through a minefield in minutes. Crabs work in teams of 5. 3 tanks advance in echelon formation, their paths slightly overlapping to clear a broad corridor. The other 2 hang back to provide covering fire and to replace any Crab that gets disabled. Powdered chalk trickles from bins on the flailing tanks, marking the edges of the safe path for following vehicles. Then there's the Churchill Crocodile, and this is the vehicle that truly terrifies the Germans. It's a Churchill tank, already heavily armoured with up to 152mm of steel plate, but instead of the hull-mounted machine gun, it has a flame projector. Behind the tank, connected by armoured piping, is a 6.5-ton armoured trailer carrying 400 imperial gallons of thickened fuel. The mixture is called Fuel K, later redesignated FTF Heavy No. 1. It's an early form of napalm. When the Crocodile's crew opens up, the flame projector shoots a jet of burning fuel over 120 metres. That's the length of a football field. The fuel burns on water and can set fire to buildings, woods, and anything else it touches. It flows into bunker-firing slits and gun emplacements, incinerating everything inside. The psychological effect is overwhelming. Many German troops surrender the moment they see a crocodile approaching and before it even fires. Those who wait until it does fire often don't get a chance to surrender. The flames fill their defensive positions in seconds. The Crocodile can fight as a conventional tank too, retaining its 75mm main gun and coaxial machine gun. The fuel trailer can be jettisoned from inside the tank if it's hit or runs empty, giving the tank greater mobility. Refueling takes 90 minutes, and pressurizing the system takes another 15 minutes. In combat, Crocodile crews sometimes spray what they call a wet shot, fuel without ignition, as a warning to defenders, giving them one chance to surrender before the flames come. But Hobart's innovations don't stop with swimming, flailing, and flame-throwing tanks. The Churchill AVRE, Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineers, is designed to transport demolition teams and destroy hardened fortifications. It's armed with a petard spigot mortar that fires a 40-pound bomb nicknamed the Flying Dustbin. The projectile looks absurd, this massive finned bomb wobbling through the air. But it's devastatingly effective against concrete structures. The petard has a range of only about 80 metres, but its high explosive charge can crack open bunkers and pillboxes. The AVRE's real versatility comes from its attachments. It can carry a small box girder bridge that can be deployed in 30 seconds to span a 9-metre gap. It can carry a fascine, a massive bundle of wooden poles and brushwood that can be dropped into anti-tank ditches to create a crossing. Some AVREs are equipped with bobbin carpet layers. A huge reel of canvas matting reinforced with steel poles is mounted on the front of the tank. As the AVRE drives forward, it unrolls this matting, creating a roadway over soft sand or mud that following vehicles can use without getting stuck. There are other specialised vehicles in Hobart's arsenal: Churchill tanks equipped with bulldozer blades, tanks carrying demolition charges, tanks with mine ploughs, armoured bulldozers, beach recovery vehicles. By early 1944, Hobart had assembled a formidable collection of weird and wonderful machines. Now he needs to train crews to use them effectively and convince Allied commanders that these ungainly-looking vehicles will actually work under fire. In February 1944, Hobart organised demonstrations for the Supreme Allied Commander, General Dwight Eisenhower, and the Invasion Ground Forces Commander, General Bernard Montgomery, who happens to be Hobart's brother-in-law. Montgomery is immediately enthusiastic. He insists that the Americans should have access to these specialised vehicles too. Eisenhower is impressed, particularly by the DD tanks. He orders American forces to use the swimming Shermans. But the other Funnies face a more sceptical reception from the American First Army commander, Lieutenant General Omar Bradley. Bradley does attend demonstrations. He's shown the crabs clearing minefields, the crocodiles incinerating mock German positions, the AVREs bridging obstacles and destroying fortifications. His initial reaction is to request 25 Sherman Crabs and 100 Churchill Crocodiles. The British War Office agrees to supply them, along with British crewed AVREs. But there's a problem. Time. By February 1944, D-Day is only 4 months away. Producing these specialised vehicles takes time. Converting standard tanks into Crabs, Crocodiles and AVREs requires skilled labour and specialised equipment. The British and Canadian forces need their own supplies of these vehicles. There simply aren't enough to meet everyone's requirements. In the end, American forces on D-Day will have DD tanks and standard Sherman bulldozer tanks. That's it. Later, Bradley will justify this decision by pointing to logistics. Accepting Churchill-based vehicles would require retraining American crews and establishing a separate supply chain for spare parts. He'll say that if the Funnies had been conceived earlier, adapted to Sherman tanks instead of Churchill's, the Americans probably would have used them. But there's also a cultural factor at play. Some American officers view the Funnies as overly complicated British gadgets. One staff officer later explains, "The general didn't like the Funnies. He saw it as an infantryman's battle. Besides, the tanks were British. He thought we should do it on our own." This decision will have profound consequences on D-Day, and nowhere will those consequences be more apparent than on Omaha Beach. June 6, 1944. H-hour approaches. In the pre-dawn darkness, thousands of ships converge on the Normandy coast. The invasion begins with airborne drops, paratroopers and glider troops seizing key inland positions. Then, as dawn breaks, the naval bombardment begins. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers hammer the German coastal defences. Bombers drop thousands of tons of explosives, and landing craft loaded with troops begin their run toward 5 beaches: Utah and Omaha for the Americans, Gold, Juno, and Sword for the British and Canadians. On all 5 beaches, DD tanks are launched from landing craft several miles offshore. This is their moment. 32-ton Shermans surrounded by canvas screens bob in the choppy English Channel. Tank commanders stand exposed, steering with long tillers. Crews sit on top, watching the water lap against their fragile flotation devices. Some tanks make it, many don't. The weather conditions on D-Day are marginal. Strong winds create rough seas. Waves wash over the low freeboard of the DD tanks, filling them faster than bilge pumps can empty them. Canvas screens are designed for calm water. These are anything but calm. At Utah Beach, the westernmost American landing site, currents push the assault force south of its intended landing zone. This accidental deviation turns out to be fortunate, putting troops on a more lightly defended stretch of beach. Most of the DD tanks successfully reach shore and provide covering fire. American casualties at Utah are remarkably light, fewer than 200 killed. But at Omaha Beach, the story is catastrophically different. Omaha is the toughest nut to crack. The beach sits beneath high bluffs honeycombed with German defensive positions. The Dry 100. 52nd Infantry Division, a veteran unit, reinforces the static defenders. Machine gun positions are perfectly sited to create overlapping fields of fire across the entire beach. Mortar crews have every metre of sand pre-registered. Anti-tank guns wait for armour to appear, and crucially, the preliminary bombardment has failed to destroy these defences. Poor visibility causes most bombs to miss their targets. The naval gunfire, while impressive, isn't sustained enough to crack the deep bunkers. 2 companies of DD tanks were assigned to support the Omaha Beach assault, 64 tanks total. Most are launched from landing craft more than 5 kilometres offshore, as per the original plan. The British, seeing the rough conditions, make a last-minute decision to launch their DD tanks much closer to shore. The Americans stick with the plan is a fatal mistake. Of the 29 DD tanks launched for the eastern sector of Omaha Beach, 27 sank. The rough seas overwhelm their canvas screens. Water pours in faster than pumps can handle. Crews have seconds to abandon ship before 32 tons of steel disappear beneath the waves. Most crews are rescued by accompanying vessels, but the tanks are gone. The infantry hitting Omaha Beach do so without the armoured support they desperately need. The result is carnage. American troops wade ashore into a wall of machine gun and mortar fire. Men are cut down in the water, on the beach against the shingle embankment. Bodies pile up. Landing craft are destroyed. For hours, the outcome hangs in the balance. Senior commanders offshore consider abandoning the beach entirely. But individual acts of courage, the presence of a few tanks that make it ashore, and the eventual saturation of German defences through sheer weight of numbers finally turn the tide. By day's end, American forces have established a precarious foothold. But the cost is staggering. Over 2,000 casualties, with more than 1,000 killed. Every man who set foot on Omaha Beach that day, Omar Bradley will later write, was a hero. On the British and Canadian beaches, the story unfolds very differently. And the difference is Hobart's Funnies. On Gold Beach, the British 50th Infantry Division lands at 0725. Before the first infantry wave touches sand, DD tanks are coming ashore. Behind them, Sherman Crabs begin flailing, their chains pounding the beach, detonating mines, clearing paths. Churchill AVREs lumber forward, some deploying bobbin matting over soft sand, others using their petard mortars to blast bunkers. Churchill Crocodiles close in on German strongpoints, and the psychological effect is immediate. When defenders see the crocodiles approaching, many surrender without firing a shot. Those who resist are methodically incinerated. The specialized armor works exactly as Hobart predicted. Minefields that would take infantry hours to clear are breached in minutes. Obstacles that would stop conventional tanks are overcome by AVREs with bridges and fascines. Bunkers that could withstand tank guns melt under the crocodile's flames. By day's end, British forces on Gold Beach have penetrated 10 kilometers inland. Casualties are about 400 killed and wounded. That's a fraction of what Omaha suffered. At Juno Beach, the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division faces rough seas that delay their landing by half an hour. The tide is higher than planned, reducing the width of usable beach and increasing congestion. Juno is heavily defended, and the preliminary bombardment leaves many German positions intact. But the Canadians have Hobart's Funnies. DD tanks provide covering fire as infantry hit the beach. Sherman Crabs clear paths through minefields while under fire. Churchill AVREs blast through obstacles. The fighting is fierce. Canadian casualties are higher than on the other British beaches, over 900 in total with 370 killed. But the Funnies make the difference between heavy casualties and complete disaster. By day's end, the Canadians have pushed farther inland than any other Allied force, reaching the outskirts of Caen. One German defender later describes watching the Sherman Crabs approach. This Sherman was fitted with a revolving drum on the front held by 2 girders, on which were tied a large number of heavy chains. The drum was revolving, and the chains were crashing onto the earth with a deafening noise, raising clouds of dust and soil. I'd never seen a machine like this. I was fascinated by its clever design despite my apprehension. On Sword Beach, the British 3rd Infantry Division lands at 0730. 21 of 25 DD tanks successfully reach shore in the first wave, providing crucial fire support. Behind them come the Funnies, Crabs, Crocodiles and AVREs. They work in coordinated teams, each specialized vehicle playing its role. The Crabs clear minefields, the AVREs bridge obstacles and destroy strongpoints, the Crocodiles incinerate bunkers. By nightfall, British forces have advanced several kilometers inland, though they fall short of capturing Caen, their ambitious D-Day objective. Casualties are around 1,000, heavy but manageable. Across the 3 British and Canadian beaches, Hobart's Funnies prove their worth beyond question. Where they're employed en masse, Allied forces successfully breach German defences despite fierce resistance. The specialised armour doesn't eliminate casualties, but it dramatically reduces them and accelerates the advance inland. General Eisenhower later acknowledges this. The comparatively light casualties which we sustained on all the beaches except Omaha were in large measure due to the success of the novel mechanical contrivances which were employed. It is doubtful if the assault forces could have firmly established themselves without the assistance of these weapons. But for the Germans defending Normandy, the Funnies represent a complete shock to their defensive planning. German military doctrine had anticipated conventional armour supported by infantry. They'd prepared accordingly. Minefields to channel tanks into killing zones, anti-tank guns positioned to engage armour at medium range, bunkers sited to resist tank gunfire. The Atlantic Wall's elaborate defences were designed around these expectations. Hobart's Funnies shatter all of it. Swimming tanks arrive with the first infantry wave not hours later as expected. Flail tanks clear minefields faster than defenders can react. Flamethrowing tanks attack bunkers with a weapon German troops have no effective counter for. Bridge-laying tanks bypass obstacles that should have stopped any advance. German commanders scramble to adapt. They redirect anti-tank guns to target the specialized vehicles. They focus mortar fire on Crabs while they're flailing and trying to disable the rotating drums. They attempt to engage Crocodiles at long range before the flamethrowers can close to effective distance. But the fundamental problem remains. The Germans prepared for a conventional amphibious assault, and Hobart gave the Allies something entirely different. One German after-action report notes with frustration, The enemy's specialized armor demonstrates capabilities we did not anticipate. Units equipped with mine-clearing devices, flame projectors and bridging equipment operate with coordination that suggests extensive training and planning. Standard defensive measures prove less effective than calculated. The story of Hobart's Funnies doesn't end on D-Day. The 79th Armoured Division continues operating throughout the Northwest Europe campaign. The specialized vehicles are attached to other divisions as needed, never fighting as a complete unit but always present where obstacles need overcoming. Sherman Crabs clear paths through German minefields across France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Churchill Crocodiles reduce strongpoints that would otherwise require lengthy infantry assaults. Havre's bridge canals and rivers, enabling rapid advances. By the end of the war, the 79th Armoured Division operated almost 7,000 specialized vehicles. Their presence is a constant factor in Allied success. Later in 1944, when American forces finally encounter the Norman Bocage, the infamous hedgerow country, they develop their own specialized vehicle, the Sherman Rhino. It's equipped with steel teeth that can tear through the thick hedgerows that standard tanks cannot cross. The Rhino is born from the same principle Hobart championed. When standard equipment fails, adapt and innovate. The legacy of Hobart's Funnies extends far beyond World War II. The concept of specialized combat engineering vehicles has become standard in modern armies. Today's militaries operate bridge layers, mine clearers, and assault vehicles that trace their conceptual lineage directly to Hobart's innovations. The British Army's current Trojan and Titan vehicles, based on the Challenger 2 tank, are direct descendants of the AVREs. The United States developed the M1 assault breacher vehicle, a mine-clearing and obstacle-breaching system. Israel's Combat Engineering Corps operates heavily armoured D9 bulldozers. All of these systems embody Hobart's fundamental insight. Specialized obstacles require specialized solutions. But the story of the Funnies is also a story about institutional resistance to innovation. Percy Hobart was forced into retirement because he challenged conventional thinking. He argued that armour should operate independently, not as infantry support. He pushed for radio communication in tanks when that was considered radical. He insisted that proper training mattered more than adherence to peacetime regulations. For these views, he was sidelined, dismissed, and sent home. Only Churchill's personal intervention brought him back. And only the desperate circumstances of planning for D-Day gave him the authority to develop his revolutionary ideas. This raises an uncomfortable question. How many other military innovations were suppressed because their advocates lacked a powerful patron? How many potential Hobarts ended their careers in obscurity because they couldn't overcome institutional resistance? The British Army nearly lost one of its greatest assets because Hobart didn't fit the mould of a conventional general officer. It took a world war and a Prime Minister's direct intervention to recognise his genius. That's not a system designed to encourage innovation. Omar Bradley's decision to reject most of Hobart's Funnies for the American beaches became one of D-Day's enduring controversies. Defenders of Bradley point to legitimate logistics concerns. The Churchills were a different tank model requiring separate maintenance and spare parts. Training crews on entirely new vehicles with only months to go would be challenging. There genuinely wasn't enough time to produce sufficient quantities for everyone. Critics counter that these are excuses, not reasons. The Sherman-based Crabs and DD tanks could have been employed more extensively. British crewed vehicles could have operated in support of American forces, as originally planned. The fundamental issue wasn't logistics or time. It was pride and a belief that American forces could succeed without British gadgets. The casualty figures tell their own story. Utah Beach, with DD tanks and favourable circumstances, under 200 killed. Omaha Beach, where most DD tanks sank and no other Funnies were present, over 1,000 killed. Gold Beach with full Funny support, 400 casualties. Juno Beach, heavily defended but with Funnies, 370 killed. Sword Beach, with Funnies, around 1,000 casualties but against extremely strong defences. The correlation isn't perfect. Terrain, German defensive strength and luck all play roles, but the pattern is clear enough. Where Hobart's Funnies operated as planned, casualties were markedly lower and objectives achieved faster. General Montgomery, Hobart's brother-in-law and supporter, writes after the war, "The division is composed of units and equipment which have no parallel in any other army in the world, and the skillful use of this equipment enabled us to obtain surprise in the tactical battle." Military historian Basil Liddell Hart goes further, describing Hobart's Funnies as the tactical key to victory. He also notes, "To have moulded the best two British armoured divisions of the war was an outstanding achievement, but Hobart made it a hat-trick by his subsequent training of the specialised 79th Armoured Division, the decisive factor on D-Day." But perhaps the most telling tribute comes not from Allied generals but from German defenders who faced these machines. After the war, interviews with captured German officers reveal consistent themes: surprise at the specialised equipment, difficulty countering vehicles they'd never encountered, and acknowledgement that conventional defensive tactics proved inadequate. The swimming tanks arriving with the first wave disrupted carefully timed defensive plans. The flame-throwing tanks created panic that no amount of training could overcome. The mine-clearing tanks negated weeks of careful minefield preparation. The 79th Armoured Division was disbanded on August 20th, 1945, 3 months after Germany's surrender. Percy Hobart returns to retirement, this time with honour. He receives a knighthood and becomes Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire. The United States awards him the Legion of Merit, a decoration he wears with particular pride. When he died in 1957 at age 71, he's widely recognised as one of the war's most innovative military minds. His funeral is attended by senior officers who once opposed him, a posthumous acknowledgement that the difficult, argumentative maverick had been right all along. Today, a few of Hobart's Funnies survive in museums. The Tank Museum at Bovington in England houses the only Sherman DD with its canvas flotation screen still intact. Several Churchill Crocodiles are preserved in various collections. A Sherman Crab sits in the Overloon War Museum in the Netherlands, knocked out during the Battle for Holland. These machines are relics now, museum pieces behind velvet ropes, but on June 6, 1944, they were the difference between success and failure. They were the weapons that German commanders never expected, couldn't counter, and ultimately couldn't stop. The lesson of Hobart's Funnies isn't just about specialised military equipment, it's about innovation in the face of institutional resistance. It's about recognising that unconventional problems require unconventional solutions. It's about valuing results over conformity, effectiveness over tradition. Most importantly, it's about ensuring that brilliant, difficult people like Percy Hobart aren't cast aside because they don't fit comfortable bureaucratic moulds. The British Army almost threw away one of its greatest assets. Only extraordinary circumstances saved Hobart's career and gave him the chance to prove his worth. The Funnies that rolled onto Normandy's beaches are his vindication. Every soldier who survived because a crab cleared a minefield, because a crocodile burned out a bunker, because an AVRE bridged an obstacle, is proof that the maverick general had been right all along. Sometimes the most important innovations come from the most unlikely sources. Sometimes genius wears an abrasive personality. Sometimes the future belongs to the Funnies,